Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. As you know, as discussed and as all of us at SPRF have been quite excited to do, we are today launching and discussing the Inclusive Education Project, as you can see on the screen. The project widely documents the experiences of students with disabilities in higher education specifically. And we're joined by the stalwarts and the giants in this field who dedicated their lives to disability activism and have done some splendid work in their tenure. I am Ria. I will be your moderator for this webinar. I am joined by my wonderful colleagues Neha Chauhan, who is the project lead, and by Fahadata Nehevi. He is also one of the researchers who's worked on writing and researching this report. Before I throw it back to Neha Chauhan, who will introduce the report to everyone, I just wanted to take a quick moment to introduce the speakers. So we are joined by Mr. George Ibrahim. He is a social entrepreneur. He's an inspirational speaker and disability rights activist. He is the stalwart responsible for organizing national blind cricket tournaments in the country and the founding chairperson of the World Blind Cricket Council in 1996. We also have Dr. Sailaja Chennath. She is a professor at the Department of Education at Delhi University. Her primary areas of interest are disability studies, inclusive education, teacher education, and the social inclusion of marginalized people. Currently, she's working on a book titled Disability, Conceptualizations and Perspectives with Routledge. We also have Dr. Sudesh Mukhopadhyay. She is an associate at the London University Institute of Education in Special Education under the TCTP Fellowship. She is also the former chairperson of the Rehabilitation Council of India, the head of the Department of Inclusive Education at National Institute of Educational Planning and Administration. Dr. Sudesh has also been a part of numerous committees that draft policies for inclusive education. And we have No, who is the founder and member of Revival Disability India. Revival is a UN-recognized disability queer affirming space dedicated to reclaiming disability stories in India. The community focuses on disability, sexuality, and intersectional ableism for and by disabled and queer people. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We are absolutely just delighted to have you and host you and have this discussion today. I will give the floor to Neha Chauhan, who has done this research quite extensively, so that she can now introduce the report.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. I am extremely grateful to all the panelists here for their constant support, guidance, and feedback throughout the research and the writing process of this report. To give a little context, there have been several policies and legislations, especially in recent times, to make university spaces barriers-free. Despite this, several barriers still restrict persons with disabilities from accessing quality education, such as poor infrastructure, negative attitudes and misinformation about disability, financial barriers, insufficient and inadequate accommodation, lack of accessible transport, and so on. According to an international study by Global Campaign for Education and Handicap International, people with disabilities have low enrollment rates in schools globally, and even if they attend schools, they're often more likely to drop out and leave early. As per Census 2011, 45% of persons with disabilities do not have access to education. Additionally, only 5% of persons with disabilities fall in the category of graduate and above, indicating that India's higher education space remains out of reach for many individuals with disabilities. Higher education credentials expand the choices and opportunities available to a person for meaningful employment, poverty alleviation, and social inclusion. And recognizing this importance of accessing higher education, this report highlights the remaining challenges to an inclusive education system in India. When we started researching inclusive education, we found that most of the research focused on physical barriers that are present. For example, they pointed out that colleges do not have ramps, or there is lack of availability of books in the required format. However, there is a lack of focus on the social and the attitudinal barriers that are present in these institutions. These barriers also hamper the college experience of persons with disabilities and hinder their academic and social development. Therefore, this report focuses on the various aspects of college and classroom experience of persons with disabilities. It highlights the factors that prevent the social inclusion of persons with disabilities and restrict the creation of a conducive learning environment for them. This report is based on both primary and secondary research tools. An extensive literature review was done to identify the gaps in the existing policy and interventions to promote inclusivity in higher education institutions. We use sources such as policy guidelines, legal documents, academic literature, peer-reviewed journals, and official reports released by the governments. We also interviewed 50 students with disabilities currently enrolled in government colleges in New Delhi to contextualize the literature, secondary literature, and gain insights from their lived experiences. Apart from that, we also identified and interviewed several stakeholders and experts on the subject of inclusive education. Our study identifies some key areas in a student's college life that influence how students with disability experience higher education. The findings from our interactions and secondary research have been summarized under 6 themes. These will be discussed in the webinar today, and I am looking forward to hearing from all our panelists about their opinion on these key themes and how colleges can be made more inclusive with respect to these areas. So that's all from my end. I request Ria to take over and introduce the themes, and Fahad can discuss the findings.
Yeah. Thanks, Neha. Just piggybacking off of what Neha said, the structure moving forward will be that we will go over the key findings that the team was able to come across while doing their research, which are namely choice of college, the transition from school to college, learning experiences, experience with college societies, career guidance, and social interactions and experience. And as I'm sure most of you would have noticed, the order is in the order of a student with disabilities going into college, their experience during college and post-college. For this, the structure that we'll follow is that Fahad, who is also a researcher on this report, will be reading out the findings, and the respective speaker is going to discuss it and offer us their invaluable insights on it. So for anyone following along, you can access the report on the SPRF website, and we're going to be following page 13 through 15. So feel free to check that out also. Yes, Fahad, I think you can take the floor from here.
Yeah, thank you, Ria, for that. Hi, everyone. And again, I want to thank all the stakeholders that are present here and the ones who made this report possible. So thank you, Dr. Sailaja, Dr. Sudesh, and Mr. George Ibrahim, as well as Nu, without whose inputs this report would have been possible. And without taking any more time, I'll just launch into the themes. So the first theme that we did study was the choice of college. And what we wanted to explore through this theme was the infrastructure and the social barriers that may restrict students' choice when it comes to sort of enrolling at a particular educational institute. What we found out was most of the students, the factor that influenced the choice of college most was the ranking of the college. But when we look at the University Grants Commission's ranking and assessments mechanism, they do not give appropriate weightage to inclusive amnesties. And that's why the poor performance on inclusivity hardly affects an institute's rank, but students, because they wanted to get into best ranked colleges, they end up choosing certain colleges which might not be best fit for for their disabilities, or colleges that might not cater to their disabilities. Another factor that they chose was distance from the place of residence, and also the accommodation that impacted their decision in terms of choosing a college. Because of the lack of sort of accommodation that most of these colleges provide, this factor becomes extremely important and limits the choice of college that these students could avail. Students with locomotor, visual, or other disabilities, they also found it very difficult to commute longer distances. And this also ends up reducing the options that they have for choosing their colleges. The second theme that we explored was the transition from school to college for students with disabilities, as the college environment is more complex than the school environment, and students are expected to make course choices, arrange for their own course material, join a college society, and many other things. And mostly they immediately when they transition from school to college, they have little to no knowledge about various inclusivity and accessibility majors and institutions, specifically higher education institutions. And they have to navigate this very complex new environment independently. When we interviewed the students, they said they did not receive any support. Most of the students did not receive any support in transitioning from school to college. There were no orientation seminars held for them to adapt to college life. The few institutions that did offer orientation sessions, they did not specifically address the inclusive policies or the services that the institute offers. Instead, the pattern in which they conducted orientation session was pretty much catered to the able-bodied student. This really caused students unnecessary hassle, and this made their college experience very unpleasant, as they had mentioned. So these were the first two themes, and now I would request Dr. Sudesh Mukhopadhyay to give her opinion on these findings and what can be done to make colleges more inclusive with respect to choice of college and transition. And a smooth.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And before I start speaking, I just want to read out a quote, which is very important in the context in which the observation for these two themes have been made. And also I want to congratulate SRF, because you say in your report that your sample was very small. So I just want to compliment that. Let's not worry about the sample, because what Dipankar Gupta, he's a famous sociologist, and he has written only on 29th April 23, he says, when policymaker privilege skills and learning aptitude and numeracy skills and learning aptitude over the lived in experience, then heading he has given is wrong number, life is not maths. That is why I wanted to quote it today as my initial thing when we talk about the choice of college or the transition. You're right. Just now, not only in NAC, even at the school level, the programs like Siddhi Shala, they have a very lip service when it comes to how do you really describe, or institute itself talks about it, how accessible it is for persons with disabilities. So that is a fact. The websites do not highlight these particular points, and that's why the choice of college, as you rightly said, may become restricted if we are only going by the NAC findings. But I will also like to say that somewhere this particular point also is related to your next point of the transition also. Suppose if there is a transition planning, which in recent, I have done some other work in that context, I found out even in a country like US, the disadvantaged population, including persons with disability and even the gender, they are very weak on transition planning, because it all starts with the schools not expecting much from these people. That is number one, our societal attitude. And second thing is the choice of subjects. For example, if it is a science college which is high ranking and a person with disability who's applying, he did not have these subjects, then naturally his choice become very restricted. So from your sample at this moment, I'm not able to really comment on which stream the students who were interviewed, they were there, because their lived in experience will directly be related to the type of things about which they have expectations in future. And maybe later on, George will also come up and explain to you how some of these students who have survived this transition planning, when they took the things in their own hands, the system did not help them. But choice of college also is somewhere related to, in a metro like Delhi, the distance matters. But before I end up, because I know only 10 minutes I'm supposed to really use your time and make this particular point, I just want to bring it to the notice of everyone when you say what we can do. I think at least in Delhi, I know my PhD student has done a work in the affiliated college of Delhi University. Practically every college has a EOC coordinator, which is a very major policy intervention post 2005 when we started working on this type of thing. But unfortunate part is EOC is not only for persons with disability, it is for all what we say, it is sort of, it crosses across all types of disadvantages, SC, ST, this, that. But the key point which schools also needs to tell, and the universities and advertisements also need to say, if you have any special education need on which you need a support, then please contact your EOC coordinator and explain. And this is very important both for choice of colleges as well as for transition planning. Please remember, unlike school, they are now young adults. So some person with hidden disability, in your case, it is the physical disabilities mostly we are talking about, which are visible also. But today, the challenge is also with the invisible disability, and these students are there in the system. And in future studies, we will have to capture them also, because the last point which I want to make is the Supreme Court have recently given a judgment and advisory to the Department of Education, persons with disabilities, empowerment of persons with disability, that less than 40% also have a right to use these EOCs. Why? Because the chapter number 3 on accommodation is not directly related to only the benchmark disability. That is another reason why the things are happening the way they are happening in the higher education. So I think for this particular point, these are the only thing that EOCs need to be advertised properly. Students need to be told, and this information should also be shared by the schools when the students are in their last years of the schooling. Then we should need to talk about that, what to expect in future. Just as we need to talk about employment and other things, we also need to talk about the opportunities in higher education, and subject choice is something else which will matter in times to come, along with whatsoever is going to happen with the online and offline opportunities in near future. So that will also decide a lot of things in near future as far as the physical distance is concerned. Thank you very much for it.
Thank you, Dr. Mukhopadhyay. I think a wonderful point that you also bring up is that, you have to look at a lot of students and their learning experience, the subjects that they have access to after looking at admissions through the lens of inaccessibility for them. And as we discussed, we're moving in the order of how we're going to look at the experience of students, let's say, who even have made it through a college, who have chosen a subject, and they're now, in the college well into their first year, let's say. How were their experiences? So a theme that we came across, and there were a lot of reflections that the team found while researching the learning experience at large. And there are a few, I think, pointers that I think the IEP team found. So Fahad, I will let you take the floor, and then I think we can move to Dr. Shailaja Chennath and get her reflections on that.
Yeah. I would like to thank Dr. Mukhopadhyay for such an insightful sort of understanding and that she shared with us. Before I go on with the learning experience theme. Thank you, Dr. Mukhopadhyay. So the third theme that we had was on the learning experience, and what we wanted to gauge essentially was the physical and social barriers faced by students in their overall learning experience, especially accessibility of study material and the teaching methods and pedagogy. So the majority of our interviews shared that their teachers catered to their needs. However, they still had to directly ask or communicate with their teachers, either by interrupting them in the class or speaking after the class, depending on the urgency of the matter. And sometimes taking this step and just asking directly or communicating in that manner, they felt a little afraid to do so. And hence a lot of students did not clarify their doubts. What they wished for was if the teachers were sort of they had a more nuanced understanding of their disabilities, and would have just structured the lectures in a manner that they wouldn't have the need to interrupt them in between. Since there's also no uniform pedagogical training that exists for teachers at higher education institutes, many teachers are also ill-equipped to cater to the needs of students with disabilities, which ends up undermining their learning experiences. The coursework in any master's or PhD degrees that we have in India does not have a course material or any sort of a semester on pedagogy or teacher training that caters to how to sort of look or how to handle diversity of students in a class. Because of that reason, mostly teachers are unable to meet the needs of students and disabilities. On the issue of tutorial or the remedial classes, the students said that they were not held regularly, and access to class materials and notes was also inconsistent. Such inaccessibility to academic material hampered their classroom experience and professional growth also. In the worst cases, it also led to dropouts. The study also revealed that students were allowed to be examined in alternative forms during internal examinations. As for external examinations, there's a set marker that they have to sit in written examinations, and they get an hour. Or those who have locomotive or visual disabilities, they get a scribe. But the interviews did mention for internal examinations that teachers did sort of allow them to be examined in alternative forms. But again, even in the institutes that this happened, a lot of teachers were very rigid in the forms of internal examinations, which led to a lot of discomfort for students. They mostly asked for typed assignments when students would have wanted or preferred oral assessments, because getting a scribe was a difficult thing for them for internal examinations. Also, on the theme of scribes, a lot of students said that they were at a disadvantage because of that, because it's a very elaborate process of getting a scribe, and sometimes the payments do not happen on time, or the quality of the scribe does not meet the parameter that the student would need. And in such cases, this having a scribe becomes more of a disadvantage than an advantage. Concerning the availability of learning materials, the students who face the most disadvantage are the ones with visual disabilities. These students require several methods to access course material and may have very specific alternative format requirements. For instance, some persons with visual disabilities prefer PDFs of coursework to use to text-to-speech applications, but they are not provided that most of them. A lot of time it's just printouts or photocopies that they get. Even though universities in the last decade have endeavored to make course materials available, but the measures have proven to be insufficient and inconsistent, and the softwares that they use are outdated, of poor quality. And in total, all of this adds up to students having a very adverse impact on their abilities to do well in classrooms. For this theme, I would request Dr. Sailaja Chennath to give her opinion and on the findings that we came up with.
Thank you, Mr. Bhatt. Before I start, I would like to, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Am I
Yes, yes, ma'am. you are.
Before I start, I would like to, congratulate the full team for having taken up this research work. It is definitely significant at this time of at this time. So I'm very happy that I'm here speaking to all of you. Incidentally, one of my MD scholars is also working on the same theme, that is higher education and students' perspective, of students with disability in the area of higher education. So, I was listening to all of Sudesh ji. I was talking to others who spoke. The first concern I have, and it's concern for all of us, is that how many disabilities are represented in higher education? We have most of the students that we see as having disability are visually challenged students, or we may have some students with locomotor impairments. But there are many other disabilities which are not represented. We don't find the person with hearing impairment coming to higher education, and there are other disabilities. They just don't reach higher education. That's a major concern. I know it's not a major focal point for this discussion. I know, but I just wanted to voice that. Okay, now coming to the students who are with us, what are we doing for them? I mean, having worked in Delhi University for the past more than 18 years, I have a lot of dissatisfaction. I know I have not done a lot of things that I should be doing for various reasons. So that's what I said in the interview also, this is what I've been saying. I've always felt guilty that I'm not doing enough for them. Of course, in our classes, we generally have students with visual impairment, and especially at masters, and at B.Ed level, we also have students with locomotor impairment. So for visually impaired students, we are not able to provide enough resource materials. One of the things that most of the students who come to us with visual impairment are mostly coming from Hindi medium. They've done their graduation in Hindi medium, so they are not very comfortable in English, and so they prefer readings in Hindi, and we are not able to give that. Most of the my subject is methodology at master's level. In that area, especially, there are no Hindi readings. So we have been struggling. I have tried to translate certain important textbooks into Hindi, but I myself am not from a Hindi speaking area. I've come from Kerala, so my Hindi is not so good. So I have limitation there also, but I've tried. And of course, in the classes, I try bilingual mode, etc. That's for everybody, not only for students with visual impairment. For everybody, bilingual is the most suited. So we try that. But I know that at higher education level, this is not enough. We need to work with immense focus on producing resource materials which are easily accessible for students with visual impairment, at least because those are the students that at present we have in higher education. We should have vision for more students with more disabilities coming to higher education. But at least at the present, we should be more ready with more resource materials for students with visual impairment. That's very, very, very important. Another one thing I want to tell you is that most of us teachers do not even do very simple things like talking at an optimum pace, allowing them to understand, comprehend, or we start writing on the blackboard and then we speak also while we are writing on the blackboard. Then it is not clear for the students. Even these small things we do not take care, and these are things that we can easily take care of, which we do not do. So I feel that all these things have to become part of the pedagogical skills of the teacher, and I think it's still taking time. There is still a lot of work to be done. And as Sudeshti was saying, there is this equal opportunity cell for every college is supposed to have every department is supposed to have. Every department is supposed to have an enabling unit, in place. This was by UGC regulation, and I have been fortunate enough to be part of actually establishing an enabling in our department with the Professor Mittal, who was also a visually challenged person. With him, it was his vision. I worked with him, but by the time the enabling unit was established, he had already retired, and that has been going on. And there we have been trying to record materials, audio recordings we have been able to make to be provided to students with visual impairment. That's the only small, little, humble thing we have been able to do. But I know that's not enough. There's a lot more to do. So I don't know. I don't know how to stop, but my flow. A lot of things to say. What I want to say is that we have to do more. We have to do more. We are not doing enough. So we still have a long way to go. We have to, all of us have to work together and see that things move better. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chennath. I think you definitely have brought up great points, especially regarding the learning experience and the pedagogy, and how we still have a really long way to go to, fully make the curriculum and colleges and everything completely inclusive. But another aspect, of course, of college life, which we all, I think, know, is that college life is not just education, it's also your social experience. It's also the college societies you go to, the fests you attend, and the excitement around being in college, and the whole, shosha around being a college student and how that's portrayed. Which of course also means what are people's experiences with college societies, college sports clubs, extracurricular activities, which arguably form a really, really big part of their college experience, which can also not be neglected when we discuss, how to make college life more inclusive for students with disabilities. So this, I think, I can let Fahad disclose the findings that we've had and some of the implications that we've discovered. And then, we would love to have Mr. Ibrahim sort of tell us what he thinks about and what his reflections are on the same. Fahad, do you want to continue?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Chand, for your insights. Now I'll just quickly move to the next two themes, which are experience with college societies and career guidance and placement assistance. For the experience with college societies theme, we just sought to identify the barriers that prevent students from joining college societies and clubs, and learn how accessible, and we want to learn how accessible these societies are to them. We also wanted to find how approachable and helpful EOCs and EUs, because a lot of time they overlap also in a lot of colleges, are in their mandate of creating an inclusive campus environment for students with disabilities. So through our several interviews, a lot of our interviewees reported on colleges not having functional, or some do not having functional equal opportunity or enabling units in their college, even though that's mandated by law. Like Dr. Janet had mentioned. The lack of accountability in ensuring EOC and EUs function properly makes higher education institutes a very exclusive space for only able-bodied students. Students who have disabilities find it really difficult. Because of this, they find it really difficult to transition to higher education because they don't have the support that EOCs or EUs could offer it to them. Our study showed that the students with disabilities participate in fewer extracurricular activities as compared to their able-bodied peers. Societies, clubs, on-campus events were structured specifically around able-bodied students, which made them exclusionary by default. They also had adverse experiences when they were in these societies, when they were neglected, and a lot of assumptions were made about their capabilities. And in some instances, I'll just quote an instance, for example, when they had to do a debate, they made one exclusive for students with sort of able bodies, and a separate event for students who were disabled, which did not sit well with the students with disabilities, and it was some of them even felt very humiliated by this. As for career guidance and placement assistance theme, we wanted to gauge the level of career guidance. We wanted to gauge the level at which the institutions provide career guidance or placement assistance for the students with disabilities, if at all. Our stakeholders as well as students rightly pointed out the purpose of higher education is a lot more than providing quality education. It also is to aspire students to be in a more conducive environment for better future prospects and learning transferable skills to enter a job market. However, our research suggested that most institutions fail to prepare students with disabilities, making it really difficult for them to get absorbed in the job market. A majority of students shared receiving no, zero, or inadequate guidance and placement assistance from their colleges. Some of the students also complained that the career counseling sessions and seminars failed to take into account the needs and restrictions of students with disabilities. They reported receiving a placement assistance. Some students did report receiving placement assistance in their colleges, but they said it was limited to only a few sessions with working professionals, and that did not amount to much for them. And even in these sessions, they did not consider the needs and requirements of students with disabilities. So Dr. George Ibrahim, I would now, Mr. George Ibrahim, I would now request you to give your opinion on these two themes and where we are lacking and how to go on from here.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right. So I'm happy to report that I am the second Malayali on this panel. I think this report is a fascinating start to a discussion and a conversation. And you've actually kind of followed a kind of chronological order, starting from school to college, and then the learning experience, and then the social experience, and then professional possibilities. Now, I think all that was kind of shared by Farhad, I think is largely true, and may not be true entirely across the board. I believe this is an evolving space. And my experience as a disabled person living in this world for more than 60 years is that people come to terms with you over a long time. They take time to kind of adjust. They come to learn. So I think the university is a much better place than what it was, say, when I was in the university several years ago. I think, as Dr. Sudesh Mukhopadhyay said, the EOC and the enabling unit, I think, are very critical elements of the university. I actually was thinking of 4 E's. So the EOC/enabling unit, to my mind, is very critical, and it's very important that the person who heads and drives it is a person who's got his heart in the right place and he's driven, and he wants to do something about it. It should not just be a checkbox ticking. Now, I just want to give you an example. Am I allowed to take college names?
Yes, you can, sir.
Okay. So this year itself, I've been to 2 colleges. I've been to Kirorimal College. I've been to Lady Sriram College. And both these colleges have a very vibrant and active equal opportunity cell. And I recently went for the Reach Festival at Lady Sriram College. And I was wonderfully surprised to see activities during the festival, which was a collaboration of Reach with other clubs and societies of the college, which created a platform where disabled students could engage with non-disabled students. And it was good to see a play being put up by the Drama Society of Lady Sriram College, which had the theme based on a book, autobiography of a proper, well-known blind woman who lives in Delhi. So that was fascinating, and I think it was progress. Likewise, at Kirorimal College, I had the opportunity of going to attend a sports meet. It was a day-long sports meet, and while it was an exclusive sports meet for the disabled, there was a huge population of non-disabled students who were involved in set up, organizing, supporting, and when there was races for the blind and things, a lot of them was running along. So it was quite an inclusive activity where non-disabled and disabled people were kind of engaging with each other. Likewise, I've also been to other colleges where the disabled and the non-disabled have had the opportunity to engage. And so equal opportunity cell, I think the initiatives, they need to drive, number one. Point number two, I believe, is the experience and platforms for people with disability to express themselves. Because my experience tells me that the understanding that the world around has of people with disability, that we are lesser beings with limited talents and abilities and not a great future. So I think these clubs and societies provide for opportunities to people with disability to express themselves. And I think the equal opportunity cells need to push for people with disability, encourage people with disability to get involved with clubs, and also work with clubs to actually open their doors. And it's happening in some of the colleges, and I think it will take a little time, but I think that's important, so that people with disability express themselves, whether it is music, whether it is poetry, whether it is theater, whether it is debate, I think, or sport for that matter. Chess, I know of a blind boy who was part of the St. Stephen's College chess team a few years ago. So things are happening there. And I think these are all kind of pointers that things can happen. And I think they need to be documented and shared so that more people know about these experiences and these changes that are happening. So when people around see disabled people kind of expressing themselves, participating and performing, perceptions change. And that's when there is greater engagement. And that's the third thing. I think we need to create opportunities for people with disability to engage with non-disabled students of the college. And I think these clubs and societies, I think, would play a very major role. There are a lot of people with disability who would like to go out hiking, do mountaineering, outdoor activities, and I think the clubs and societies of colleges definitely can play a role in actually doing this. And I think this is happening in a very small way. And my recommendation is that these are documented so that future generations actually get to know that these are possible and these are necessary. Because when students, whether it's disabled or non-disabled, when they come out of university and getting ready to look at professional life, I think it's important for them to have the skills, social skills, be able to confidently engage with each other, confidently engage with the ecosystem, confidently express themselves. And that's when job opportunities open up. The equal opportunity cell also, to my mind, has a responsibility, or should have the responsibility, of actually career guidance while students are within the university. And I believe some of these equal opportunity cells also do have training programs in terms of getting disabled people familiarized with technology. Some of them also, as one of the previous speakers said, create audiobooks. There are a lot of resources available in this country and globally on the net, as well as in libraries like Sugama Pustakale and Bookshare and so on, where people with disability can access accessible reading material, study material. And it's a dynamic process of constantly evolving in terms of content. So I think lecturers and professors also can, to my mind, be aware of these spaces which are developing around the university, may not be connected with the university, but they are definitely there in terms of content. So that's another point I wanted to make. And I think job fairs recently, there in the School of Open Learning, for example, there was a job fair which was organized for people with disability. It was a collaboration between an NGO and the School of Open Learning. And right now, as we speak, the Delhi School of Social Work has opened up their doors to placement, and they have invited corporates as well as organizations who would hire to come in and speak with their students. And there are a few disabled students also there. So there are things slowly happening, but I think that the entire university, I believe there are 110 odd colleges in Delhi University, and I think it's important that whatever happens in one part of the university needs to be kind of communicated with the rest of the colleges, so that they can take the good and implement. So I think it's an evolving space. We are still far away from where we should be, but I think there is promise and potential. And it's important that the EOCs and enable units are manned, headed, and driven by people who are highly motivated, aware, and sensitive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Abraham. That was quite enlightening. And thank you for sharing the stories also. They were quite heartwarming. The next speaker would tentatively be No, but I think they're not feeling well right now. So they had to unfortunately drop off the call. But they were kind enough to share a paper with my colleague Neha, who has led the research project. So I'll just request Fahad, you can read the section on overall social interactions and experience, which sort of is in the same vein as what Mr. Abraham was just discussing, and something we've touched on along the rest of the themes. And then Neha, you can read out some of the pointers that you have from No. Fahad?
Yeah. Thank you, thank you, Mr. Abraham, for your insights. So the final theme of the report is social interactions and experiences. And what we wanted to focus on learning was how the college experience, the overall college experience beyond academic, include beyond academic learning and extracurricular activities. The aim was to highlight attitudinal barriers to make an inclusive education system. What most interviews mentioned was that they were treated differently and felt excluded because of their disability. This differential treatment, they mentioned, stems from a lack of awareness and sensitization among teachers and students. In some cases, they reflected that in their bid to cater to students with disabilities, teachers end up overprotecting or unconsciously undermining them by making certain assumptions about what students can or cannot do. This may make students with disabilities feel less inept compared to the rest of their class, which affects their college experience or the overall college experience that they have. Most of the students said that they aspire for accommodative measures and not differential treatment. This was the final insight from our report. I'll now request Neha to mention the pointers that Nu had given.
Hi everyone. So as Ria mentioned, Nu wasn't feeling well and they had sent in their write-up to me. They had summarized some of their own personal experience into some pointers, and I'm now going to read out those. In addition to all the findings related to the social interactions and experiences of the report, I would also like to add my own experience of being the only physically disabled student with a speech disability in a class growing up. I was treated differently at every step. For the longest time, I was unaware that I was allowed to ask for accessibility within academia. I thought stairs are something that I just have to deal with my entire life. I didn't know about ramps. I thought I'd have to live in a world where classmates would have to help me up the stairs, and that's just how it would be. That I would have to get used to for asking for help. While asking for help isn't a bad thing, asking for help with your agency intact is something that I had to learn to do. To be very honest, I never felt a sense of belongingness in any of the institutions I went to, not only because of the lack of accessibility and disabled-friendly physical spaces, but also due to lack of sensitivity towards disability beyond tokenist measures to strike that intricate balance between helping too much or not helping at all. A problem that many of us must have faced at some points in education spaces and their school lives, regardless of ability, are maths teachers that are not patient enough in understanding why we don't understand how math problem works. As a result, a lot of us growing up grow up to have a fear of numbers, because we, at least I, have grown up to believe that no one would be patient enough to explain each step of the math problem to me. Here, accessibility extends beyond classroom, it extends to teacher attitudes and sensitivity. Teachers who have students with disabilities in their classrooms should educate themselves on how to make the environment more conducive to disability, the classroom environment as well as the social environment. They should also familiarize other able-bodied children with disability and understand concepts such as script time. Time as a universal concept was coined by able-bodied folks and caters to their convenience. The concept of deadlines, competition, marks, employability caters to a capitalist able-bodied mindset. Because of the lack of sensitivity around disabilities within education spaces, reclaiming time to suit my bodily and mental health needs, giving myself time to rest and recover, or even being patient and understanding with myself. When I fail to understand a basic math problem or fail to complete an assignment due to a depressive episode simply because I had a stroke when I was in 4th grade was difficult. In school and college campus, often the place where a child spends most of their time in a day, ceases to be a safe space when a disabled child gets bullied and called names due to the insensitivity that prevails among the other students, and to address which the institutions themselves have done almost too little. When I walked into school after my stroke and acquired disability that I had, I could see that I was evidently othered. I was always seated at the very front of my class when I wrote my tests. I was always made to sit in another room when I gave my exams. I was always singled out, always made to feel different, always made to feel like others are doing me a favor by staying with me through lunch break and assembly. Always picked on for being allowed to come late to school. When I was told by a teacher that I shouldn't go on the class trip because there will be no one to take care of me, even though my mother was actively encouraging me to go, I never expressed my anger. I didn't end up going even though all my friends did. So these were the pointers that No had sent to me. That's all from No's end.
Thank you so much, Neha. And I think, wow, that was quite well articulated, and I think gives us, as listeners, especially something to take back with us post this webinar, especially when we think about the experience of students who feel othered in classroom settings and who otherwise, of course, deserve to have an inclusive education and an inclusive space where they can thrive. And with that said, I also, since we have a few extra minutes, we can take some of the questions that we've actually gotten. So the first one, I think, is for you, Dr. Sudesh. I understand that you have responded. Yeah, but would you mind that I read this question out? Okay, cool.
Yeah, you can.
Okay, thank you. So the question reads from Surbhi. It says, the new NEP draft bill has set its agenda that no child should be left behind when it comes to education. For this, they have given a lot of weightage to homeschooling, making enrollment in educational institutions a non-mandatory issue. Do you see this incentivizing persons with disabilities to take up homeschooling rather than the conventional schooling system?
Actually, I have already answered her that homeschooling, the home-based education, it is called. It's not called even homeschooling. It came with 2009 RT Act, which was amended in 2012 to accommodate the persons with disabilities. And there has been a lot of research. Even the chapter on the benchmark disability in RPWD Act, it gives a choice between a regular, what we call the general school and a special school. But as far as the home-based education is concerned, it is part of the RT Act. And in that, it means that if you are in my jurisdiction area of a particular school and you are not able to attend the school, then services will be provided to you so that you can come up to that level. And it also applies to the out-of-school children also who are not able to attend or who are not part. So it is part of that. So we should see the things in that context. It's not that they are being encouraged, but then there are some students who may not be able to attend school, then school has to reach them.
Right.
So it is not a new concept in that sense. And another point, since I'm speaking, I just want to say, which is cutting across the other sections also. See, the problem with the EOC was that though in Delhi it is much more operating in the university and colleges, but in many states only initially started only for SC, ST and those categories. It did not included the PW persons with disabilities. And second thing is there is already a lot, and there is also a responsibility for the students with disability. That is what I want to highlight. Because as I said, you are adult. Once you reach a college, you are an adult. So you have to go and register with the EOC and tell them we want that. Because there are case studies which I have also quoted somewhere in maybe in your report also. This is actual case study. The student never wanted to disclose his condition. Only when he missed his transport for some reason or did not reach home and there was a lot of panic, then only his classmates and others came to know that he has this problem.
Right.
And then help out. So it is the two.
Sorry, Dr. Mukhopadhyay, I think we've lost you. There seems to be some connection issue. But Mr. Abraham, do you want to speak in the interim?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, when it comes to employment and career guidance, there are a number of disabled students who study in the IIMs across the country. And in fact, all the IIMs have people with disability, and many of them get extremely good placement with fancy salaries and fancy responsibilities. So I think this just establishes the fact that, studying with the best, you also pull up your socks and you also kind of you also kind of try and beat the cut. So I've seen this at IIM Ahmedabad, I've seen this as IIM Bangalore, Calcutta, Lucknow, Indore, all these places. You have disabled students who made it into the corporate world, and
Right.
that's promising.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Abraham. Dr. Chennath, I think you also want to pitch in.
I just wanted to say about social inclusion. When it comes to students with disabilities, I think social inclusion is a very, very important thing, which all of the speakers have said. And I've seen that within years, this definitely has improved over years. But still, I feel there is a lot of work to be done in this area. We still need to do a lot of peer counseling. We even need to, even some of the, young teachers to come and etc. They need a lot of, awareness building, because it is there. Teachers also have a role in counseling peers, so that students with disabilities feel included in the classroom, because this academic inclusion is not at all enough.
Right.
They need to have a sense of belonging in the classroom, in the other spaces of the institution. So for that, I think a lot of work has to be done. And I've even now I see that students who are visually challenged, they generally prefer to make groups among students, like-minded people or students with visual impairment only. They don't like to mix with sighted students. I've asked many groups, but they feel, no, we are happy. Madam, हम ऐसे ही खुश हैं. हम इसी में खुश हैं. This is, so I think this somehow we have to break this, and we have to actually work very hard for the social inclusion. It's very important for me.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Chennath. I agree. I think a lot of the onus is on us externally also to, make the space a little more inclusive, entirely inclusive, actually. I think Dr. Sudesh has joined us. Ma'am, do you want to finish what you were saying?
Current chala gaya tha, so I lost the connection. My only question is, it's a two-way process. We also need to ask. And now when I am getting old and I face some of the accessibility issues, I have realized if I go and ask someone, can you help me to negotiate this here? Even they feel, oh, auntie madad maang rahi hai, hame karni chahiye. So I think we also need to educate all others also, along with whatever is there in the policy provision. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Sudesh. I think that's a great point. Finally, we just have a last question. I think it's for you, Mr. George. So I'll just read that out and you can let us know what you think. So it says, what are some affordable yet large-scale sources of disability-friendly resources in India? Are there any common aggregators and providers? And are they affordable by institutes in within geographical proximity or periphery?
That's a very wide question, and I don't think I'll be able to answer the entire thing. But yes, resources are available. It depends on the disability. Now, when it comes to the affordability part, there is a scheme from the government called the ADIB scheme, which it is designed to make available technology and resources for people with disability who are not economically well off. There are certain criteria, and I think a lot of technology and resources are distributed. The UGC also has a fund. It's not very substantial, but they do have provisions for colleges to take the resource and invest in making colleges. It could be their resource centers, it could be their architectural barriers. I think you mentioned this. I saw the abbreviation HEPSN, Higher Education for Persons with Special Needs. I think there is a fund for that. So for visually impaired people, for example, you have books in accessible formats, whether it's Braille or audio or e-text, in libraries like Sugamya Pustakalaya and Bookshare, and likewise, various resources coming up, and unfortunately, it's very ad hoc in the way it is being developed. But resources are there, and I think we just need to go out and look for them. And there are a lot of free resources also. There are a lot of apps which help you to read. For example, there is an app called the Voice Stream, which is 500 rupees one-time payment, and it enables you to read books on your phone. There's a lot of content available. I would be veering a little bit towards visually impaired people because I've been visually impaired and I work with people who are blind and visually impaired. So most of my awareness of resources would be in that direction. But there are mobility aids and things also available. There are high-end ones which are expensive, but there are also low-cost ones which are made available by companies like Alimco, and there are various NGOs who also distribute technology. So I think it's about Google searching and asking around, and you will find the resources which are relevant to the disability that you are looking for. Dr. Shailaja had made a mention of people with disability, especially blind people, sticking together. And that is, to my mind, a reality, meaning, and in fact, there have been a couple of occasions when colleges have invited people like me to actually speak to an audience and suggest ideas and tips for breaking the ice and allowing people with disability, especially blind people, to mix around with the others. And I think that's where the societies and clubs would play a major important role, and also the push from the Equal Opportunity Cell. I think it won't happen automatically. It won't happen organically. I think the platforms to engage should be created, and you'll find people who are interested in a particular art form or a particular skill gravitating towards that, and that will slowly, but it will be a gradual process. It won't happen overnight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prem. Just at large, I think we're close to the end of the webinar, but my sincere thanks to everyone for joining, especially the speakers. It was instrumental to have you, and for the report, as well as the wonderful work you have done over the years. And I'm sure everyone is taking a lot of important pointers back with them following this webinar. I also want to give the floor to Neha Chauhan, who's a project lead, to give her final vote of thanks to everyone. And then, of course, we can close out the meeting. But yeah, a thanks from me. And I'll now give the floor to you, Neha.
Thank you, Ria. So I would like to begin by thanking the panelists and the audience member for attending the webinar. I would also like to express my gratitude to Ms. Neha Simlay, the founder director of SPRF, for her continued support throughout the duration of the project, and to the board of trustees for their guidance and inputs. I also want to thank the students who were interviewed for the study and Revival Disability India for their research assistance. And I am also particularly grateful to all the stakeholders that we interviewed for our report. Some of them couldn't make it to the event today, but their insights were extremely useful for this report. And last but not the least, I would also like to thank the team members of SPRF for all the review, design, and editing work that went into making this report. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks to everyone. Thanks to the team, and meeting all of you also on the screen. Shailja, George, good. We will meet again. Thanks, Suhad, for putting up all the things, and thank you everyone in the team of.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.